Okay, so I have tried to follow a course from Coursera called Cloud Computing Foundations. And I like to share a little bit about what I've been doing with that. So you can see on the screen here that within this course we're actually looking at different cloud providers. And we will look at how to deploy some code into each of these cloud providers. So we have Microsoft Azure, um, and there's AWS, and then we have Google Cloud. I will be taking in some code from the course content, which was produced by Noah Gift, and we'll just look at this code first, and then go on from there. So the first thing I will do is to set up a cloud environment on AWS. So that means that we will look at a cloud shell, and then I'll just show that how that works, and then we will go on to Cloud9, which is like the development tool for AWS. Now for Azure, they also have a cloud shell, and similarly for Google Cloud, there's a cloud shell. Okay, so I'm sitting in Singapore, but unfortunately the cloud shell is not available in Singapore for AWS, so I'll have to select another environment. So let's just go ahead and select Sydney, which is within the same region. Okay, so this will start the Cloud Shell, and the Cloud Shell is basically Unix or Linux terminal into a cloud instance. Okay, after waiting a little bit, we see that the shell finally came up, and you will see that we are in a Cloud Shell user folder. And we have some basic shell configuration. I'm just going to check which Python version we have here. We may have Python 3 version. Yeah, we have one there. So we can use that as well if we want to develop in this environment. Now for this particular cloud environment, I will go ahead and use Cloud9. So I will not go further with this shell interface, but I'll show you how that works on Microsoft Azure afterwards. Okay, so for the Cloud9 environment, it will actually also launch an instance, and it actually helps you to work within the environment that AWS is offering. So I'll call this cloud computing. here I just described that I'm just following some of the basics from one of the foundation courses from Coursera. Okay, so let's go ahead and start it up. So we can create, it will create a new EC2 environment. It will be a C2 micro, so that's good enough. So they recommend Amazon Linux 2. You can also use Ubuntu if you want to do that. I'll actually go ahead and do that. Okay, now it will automatically shut down after 30 minutes. So that will actually make sure that you save on usage. It will also create IAM roles, so that's helping you to get access to different AWS services. Okay, so let's go to the next step. So here's the description of the environment we're going to launch, and then we create it. So this will take a little while to get started, but once it's up and running, then we have a Cloud9 environment which looks a bit like Visual Studio Code. Okay, now we are up and running, and you can see here that we have a terminal in the bottom, so we can actually see we are in a folder called environment. And this is the instance currently running with the default configuration. Okay, now in this environment we can then go ahead and clone the code that was given from the course. So here this is called GitHub Actions demo, and go into GitHub Actions demo, and then we can see that we have a make file, we have a Python file, and we have some requirements files, and each of these are made for each of the cloud environment that we'll be using later. There's also a test Python file. Now let's look at that from the editor environment or the development environment that is given here. So here you have the Python file, and then so all that it does is that it has a function that adds 2 values, and then there's the call of the function that prints out the result. There's a test file that runs a test, and it actually tests that the function is working, right? Then there is a make-file, and the make-file is one of the things that was explained in this course of making it easier to set up your development environment, where you actually install the Python environment and then run the commands to install the different dependent packages for that environment. So in this case, the basic one is where we are now. We still have to create that environment, so that's not done yet. And you can then run make install, and then it will install the dependencies. You can also run a lint once that everything is installed. The lint will validate the code, and you can run the test, which will then verify that the code is working. So we can install virtual environment. Shall we call this GitHub Actions, just like described here? Okay, and then we source it. Oops, there we go. So the environment installs, the virtual environment install a copy of Python into this folder, which is given by the home folder based on that tilde sign. And to activate it, we type source and then go into that folder, go into the bin directory, and then hit type activate. So that's it, now it's activated. So we now say Python version, and we have Python 3.6 currently installed here. Let's just go on and then install the rest of the code. So with this we have to run the makefile. So we say make install. And this will install the packages depending for this environment. It may be that this version of Python is not fully compatible, but let's try. Now we can do make a test to see if the test runs. Oh, it runs, so that works. So that worked actually fine. Now, in order for us to commit it back into our own GitHub folder, we'll have to set up this Cloud9 with a key pair. Okay, so to get ready to commit into our own GitHub project, we have to create the key pair. So we use SSH key gen, and we type -t RSA and then enter, and this will create the key pair into the home folder under the SSH folder, and then create it in the file ID RSA. So we just put an empty passphrase and enter, and that's it. So now we can read the file. So it's actually located, the public file is the one that we have to put up in the GitHub, right? So we cat it, and this is the content of the file, which we copy and paste into the GitHub environment. So I'm going to show you where that is. So under settings in GitHub, then you go to SSH keys, and then you create a new key, and I'll call this cloud 9 C, and then I paste the key in. So adding this key in, and of course it asks for a password. Now that's done, and we can now go ahead and add the code here into this GitHub environment. So we'll do that afterwards when we come back in the next session.